Thursday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're having a good afternoon. Browns back at work out in Berea, getting ready for the New Orleans Saints. Down in New Orleans on Sunday, longtime Browns beat reporter Tony Grossi, ESPN Cleveland, on the things he's hearing about a potential coaching change.
My worst case scenario is they get rid of him and we go to this coaching search crap. Like the Adams don't have time to do that, Tony.
That's why Vrabel is hovering over this thing. It's either Stefanski or Vrabel, in my opinion.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, to be honest, I would be okay with either. I think Stefanski would get a bum deal if he doesn't come back, but replacing him with Vrabel would help, heal that wound, right? It would be a very popular move, I would imagine, and it would be logical. But I'm not advocating it.
Let's welcome in Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. Quincy, there's been so much talk about Vrabel and Stefanski and Andrew Berry. Number one, there's no guarantee that Mike Vrabel wants to take this job as a head coach. He was in Berea with the Browns to kind of learn the GM side of things in addition to being a defensive consultant. And the only reason you do that is you're going to want say in personnel when you get another opportunity to be the head coach.
Yeah, I mean, this is somebody whose fallout from Tennessee also had a lot to do with what the general manager side was doing. So it might not be that he wants complete control because, like, Mike Vrabel's a good head coaching candidate, but I'm going to be honest with you. He's not, I get to determine my own plans and be the GM head coach candidate. People don't even want to give that to Bill Belichick. He ain't Bill Belichick. So he might be aiming for that, but he's not going to be able to get that anywhere. But he probably wants to have a little bit of a say in whatever goes down with the front office decisions. He won't be in charge of it, but he probably wants a little bit of a say there. But yeah, would Mike Vrabel want this job? I think that's going to be determined on a couple of things. What is their commitment to Deshaun Watson going forward? No credible coach is going to want to tie themselves to Deshaun Watson after this year. That's just what it is. Mike Vrabel isn't going to want to do it. Nobody's going to want to do it. If you're going to have a commitment to Deshaun Watson for the rest of this year, then, not the rest of this year, for the rest of his contract, and you're going to put him out there and start him and treat him like the starting quarterback of this team, then you're going to have a hard time finding candidates. My whole thing is, if you realize that Deshaun Watson is the problem, you move on from him. What is even the point in changing head coaches when you don't think that's the main problem that's been going on with the team? But yeah, if you want to switch to Mike Vrabel, you're probably going to have to make an immediate commitment to getting rid of Deshaun Watson, which would mean you would probably eat that cap space a little bit earlier. With Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski, you kind of just go with what the plan is, which is to kind of ignore Deshaun Watson for the next couple of years and then just wait for that contract to expire.
So do you think Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry survive? I mean, it was, and the only reason I pose this question, you expected to contend for an AFC championship this year.
Yes.
And you're contending for the top pick in the draft. You're closer to that than the AFC championship.
Records don't get coaches fired. Journeys do, right? Like, if you collapse for the rest of the season, you don't win a game for the rest of the year, and you look terrible doing it, you're going to get fired. There's no way around that. That's just going to happen. But if you turn this around at the second half of the season, go 500 or better, or you get a game that people don't expect you to win, maybe you beat Pittsburgh, maybe you beat Pittsburgh in Kansas City or something like that, or maybe you beat Baltimore again, and that changes the narrative of what this season is. Right now, that's what's most important for the Cleveland Browns is the narrative of this season. And if they don't have increased offensive output for the rest of the year, the narrative is that this team stunk and the coach should be gone. If they have much better offensive output, particularly from the quarterback position for the rest of the season, the narrative's going to be, wow, Deshaun Watson was so bad he made Jameis Winston look like a franchise quarterback when he stepped in there. Obviously, Deshaun Watson's the problem. Like, if the Browns are going to sell that argument to Browns fans and to the brass to move on from Deshaun Watson, they got to make a good argument with the rest of the season by having this offense look significantly better, under Winston than it did under Watson. And 2 games into it, I mean, like Jameis Winston has already matched the passing touchdown totals of Deshaun Watson. He already has a lower sack percentage, and he already is almost a 3/4 of the way to his total passing yards in just 2 games in a drive. So there's evidence there that suggests the offense is going to play better for the rest of the season. And as long as the offense plays better for the rest of the season, you have a clear argument you can make on what went wrong this season, and it was Deshaun Watson. And since Deshaun Watson's failure as a quarterback was so unforeseeable, like as far as on the field goes, I think everybody kind of gets a pass on that one, at least from the front office, because I don't think Jimmy thought it would turn out this bad. I don't think Andrew thought it would turn out this bad. And I don't think Kevin thought it would turn out this bad. Nobody thought he was going to be this bad in 2024. So the failure of Watson will kind of just be seen as a thing that's on Watson himself. It's what the offense does outside of Watson. If you can provide a credible argument for, hey, Kevin Stefanski's really good at his job as an offensive guy, you should still keep him around despite moving on from him.
So
Watson.
The other thing that we saw against the Chargers, we were talking about it a little bit before, defense is really good, but the Browns defense, there were just some catastrophic breakdowns. You can't do what they did in 3rd and long. Jim Schwartz, defensive coordinator, talked about those big breakdowns against the Chargers today.
No, one was just really poor execution. The 3rd and long, we're in a defense that we should be able to play that play, and and we got a little bit squirrely trying to make an educated guess on where the ball was going instead of just executing our part of the scheme and doing our job. And and I've said this before, it's one of those times where you're trying to make a play, you're trying to make an interception, and you end up sometimes hurting the defense. And that one, the other one was just 100% breakdown in communication. And we had 8 guys playing one thing, and we had 3 guys playing another. And when it's all said and done, communication is my responsibility. It's, that's something we haven't had a whole lot of, and we take a lot of pride in, keeping everybody on the same page. But we broke down there, and we paid a dear price for it.
In Quincy, every NFL game, there's usually 5 or 6 plays that you look at and you say, those were 2 of them. I mean, that game was still very much winnable before your defense decided to play 2 different coverages or take chances and come up empty.
No, those 14-point swings, because those were also on 3rd and longs, both of them, that would have gotten the Chargers either off the field or to kick a long field goal. And their field goal kicker's not great, right? So, I mean, obviously that cost the Browns the game defensively. Jim Schwartz makes a point about most of the coverage breakdowns that they have aren't really coverage breakdowns, at least with the Jim Schwartz era. Like the Joe Woods era, something different. But Jim Schwartz, it's more about somebody tried to make a play. It didn't work out. They gave up a big play instead. But yeah, the communication breakdowns, you don't want those. And you want this team to play focus. And I think that's part of what happens when your team is struggling like the Browns are, is that guys want to make plays to kind of swing the momentum, and they take more chances because why not? You're 2-7, and that leads to a lot of stuff like this happening.
All right, so before we go to break, you look at this roster and moving forward. Obviously, you got to look into the future. Do you think the Browns have enough young players? Again, this is from one of your shows. Are they good enough and young enough?
Yeah, I think they have a good building block of young, on their rookie deal, guys who might not be star players, but will be really good rotational or starting players for this team, right? DeJuan Jones is somewhere in that alignment. I don't think he's ever going to get good enough as a run blocker to be a star at the tackle position, but he's naturally just strong as a pass blocker. I think Isaiah McGuire is somebody who can really hold down that opposite edge position. Mike Hall has some star potential, right? But that's what these next two drafts are for. You got some really solid guys here that can hold down the fort and start. But where are the stars, the next generation of stars going to come from the Cleveland Browns? It's going to come from these next two draft classes where you have already seven top 100 picks projected for those two draft classes. So they've done well getting something out of some of these draft classes where they didn't have first or second round picks. I mean, you look at that 2023 draft class, it looks way better today than it did 3 weeks ago, right? Dewan looks like he could play left tackle. That's going to be a huge win for you. Cedric Tillman looks like he's going to be, at the very least, a quality NFL wide receiver. Isaiah McGuire looks like he could be a quality starting edge. And that's 3 guys already out of a draft class where you did not have a first or second round pick. And if you hit there, that will be very good for you going forward. That hasn't even gotten to some of the guys who are going to get chances, like Luke Whippler, that got injured, right? Like, he could be your starting center right now if he didn't get hurt. So I think that you have a base of some really solid players from the last couple of draft classes. Now it's time to go out and get some star players, some playmakers. Particularly, you want to get it at the quarterback position, and I would consider running back this year too.
Quincy Carrier, Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage, and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. We'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason when we return.
I just picked up all the Ohio Lottery holiday scratch-offs.
They're multiplying.
Yeah, multiplying. With the chance to multiply my prize by 200 times with Holiday Bonus Millions.
No, they're multiplying.
Oh, you're in a daze.
A holidays.
Snap out of it, because even if we don't win instantly, all the holiday games offer a second chance to win up to 1,000 times the price of the ticket.
Wait, did you say up to 1,000 times?
Sure did.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
I just heard the reasoning from our two-time coach of the year. What the heck is he talking about? He said it wrong. No, he said it right. He don't want to play because he don't want to get hurt. And he turns around and benches him. Well, if you benched him, then he said what he said, and you knew what he said. Since when do players tell you what they want to do and when they want to do it? If he's cleared to play, he should be playing. But no, we don't put the best players on the field, not that he's the best. We put anything out there just to collect some money and let the fans get eaten up how bad they play. And once again, I'll say it, they don't care about the fan base. Take care, guys.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Quincy benched him. I don't know what.
Yeah, he should start him in spite of those comments.
He
like,
benched him.
did he not make the appropriate move that you would want a coach to do?
I think he wanted
that people are just mad.
I think that I don't think he wanted him to take his side. He kind of softened the blow and said he didn't mean to say that. I think he wanted him to be a little more hardcore with him, but. Again, that's not Kevin's.
That's not good coaching.
But I know I'm pretty much done with Jedrick Wills, and I think you're pretty much done with him too.
And I think the team's done with them. They decided to play DeJuan Jones at left tackle for the rest of the year. I mean, obviously, since DeJuan has been somebody who's gone in and out, you're not going to want to go scorch earth on Jed Wills and just banish him because you don't have any other left tackles on the roster. So if Jed Wills does have to play, you still want to be able to be in a position for him to play. So I understand why they didn't go scorched earth there. And that's why you can't go scorched earth there. It's one thing for us, me as a fan, to be like, hey, I'm done with Jed Wills. I don't want to see him play anymore. But Kevin's job is one that kind of requires him not to be that reactionary. Because if he were, that wouldn't be good for locker room relationships. You look at coaches who act like that, they usually end up getting fired within 2 years and having pretty disastrous locker room situations, because that's just not a way that you're supposed to behave as a coach. That what he did there, you might not like it, but that's how you're supposed to handle that, right? Okay, well, he wasn't trying to say that, but we benched him. Like, yeah, he benched him. Like they punished him for the comments. They're not giving him the opportunity going forward. And DeJuan Jones is gonna have a clear chance to take his job. That is how that is handled. I have no issue with how Kevin Stefanski has handled that. There's other things we can complain about with what Kevin Stefanski has and has not done this year. That not one of them, in my opinion.
Well, there is no penalty box to sit him in on the bench, so we'll just say that
you want him to get a belt out and give him a spanking in front of everybody. Like, at what point, is enough on all of this? Like, what do you want him to do? Cuss Jed Wills out in front of everybody? That makes no sense. This is a professional work environment. You can't do that.
All right. Ken Dorsey, offensive coordinator today, asked about the biggest issue that the Browns have with the run game.
I think when you look back at, you evaluate, okay, what schemes have been effective for us, what schemes have not been effective for us, and why. Is it an execution piece? Is it a versus the looks we're getting piece? That type of thing. So I think when you go back and look at, there's some concepts that hey, we've run very well. Whether it was the start of the season till now, and there's some concepts that we weren't as effective in. So it's curtailing the run game to make sure we're maximizing those effective concepts and cutting back on the less effective concepts without becoming one-dimensional as an offense. So I think when you look at that stuff, yes, there's things that overall hasn't been as effective, but then there's also things that have been very effective, and we want to obviously lean on those things in terms of what guys are most comfortable running and we can execute at a high level.
Honest, he was asked what the biggest issue with the run game was. I have.
You can't say that.
Yeah, exactly.
They're old. That's the answer. Like, they're old, and the young guys that they have aren't great run blockers, right? Ethan Posick, not a great run blocker, never have been. DeJuan Jones certainly struggling to find his feet on the left side as a run blocker. Wasn't really a great run blocker on the right side. And then some of your guys that you rely on, Joe Bitonio and Jack Conklin. And Jack, like, to give him credit, he's still playing at a good level. He's not playing at like all pro running, best right tackle running tackle in the league anymore, but he's fine there. He's holding up quite well. But it's really Joel is getting older. He's not as strong as he used to be. Them back injuries seem to have taken a beating on him, and he doesn't have the ability to stonewall guys like he used to. And Wyatt Teller is not a consistent player anymore. And I think that is really your issues. Like, the pass blocking for this team since they made the switch to quarterback position, they're like 11th in pass blocking efficiency in the NFL since switching to Jameis Winston. That's not been the biggest issue on the team. It's really been this run blocking that's struggled the last couple of weeks. But maybe the bye week can get them enough to figure out what they need to do going forward and how to get DeJuan Jones in a position to be more successful in the run game, because there were times this year where they were able to run the ball quite well.
So when you look at it, you think it's time to have the move off of Joel Bitonio and Posick? Were they injured? I
mean, you're going to have to pick somewhere to upgrade this offensive line. You're probably not going to do it at left tackle because you want to see what DeJuan gives you, right? At right tackle, there's an opportunity there with Jack Conklin, but tackles are very hard to come by. So if the right one's not available in the draft, I can see you not wanting to replace Jack Conklin because he's also your best run blocker right now. So now you look at the interior. Wyatt Teller, for all of his flaws, still can run block a little bit. So you have to look at the other two guys who are struggling. Ethan Posick, there's a big opportunity to upgrade there. And then Joe Bitonio, there's an opportunity to upgrade there, right? Zach Zentra was drafted to be a road grader. Now, obviously, first-year offensive lineman, you're not going to expect him to be great year one. It takes these guys 2 to 3 years to get the muscle mass to be able to play, and especially if we're talking about a offensive lineman who relies on their strength. So that, I think, is going to be the two areas where you have to upgrade and the two opportunities you have to upgrade, because you have yourself committed to different projects along this offensive line elsewhere.
All right, I know you've addressed this on your show as well. The Amari Cooper trade. What do you think of it?
Yeah, man, this is a win. You got a 3rd-round pick for a guy who, let's be honest, like even if this team had a good record, they were probably going to move off of because he was not performing this year. He has not played for Buffalo, and he's not been super productive for Buffalo, and that certainly adds into it. But if you just look at the compensation for what teams got for wide receivers, the only team that got something similar, and they got a better package, right, for Devontae Adams. They got a 3rd round that could be a 2nd-round pick, and it's the Jets' 3rd-round pick, so there's a good chance that 3rd-round pick is going to be a pretty good 3rd-round pick. The Browns got the Bills' 3rd-round pick, will be at the end of the 3rd round, but it's important to remember it's not like a 4th-round pick because you got like 20 comp selections in the 3rd round in between the 4th round, right? So it's still a really good pick that you're getting there in the 3rd round. And that's a pretty good compensation for a player that you had no plans on returning the year after. And it opened win for Cedric Tillman to get in, and he's been as productive as we expected Amari Cooper to be this season.
Quincy Carrier and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. We'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE. Be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, how you doing? This is Lil Dog. The reason why I was concerned about the Browns quarterback, because you guys got this quarterback that's from Miami. He ain't going to be the quarterback for the Browns. He's going to be another bust for our organization. He might fit another team. But I think, honestly, the Browns should go after Shedeur Sanders, honestly. If they lose the playoff and don't win the national title, the Browns will have a good shot at Shedeur Sanders. But I think, honestly, since his father has a pedigree here in Ohio, you need to go ahead and get Shedeur Sanders. He'll be protected, and he won't be so much distracted. He is a quarterback. That's a QB. Look at how he's leading the college right now. And then he would know what weapons the Browns will need.
So I always appreciate all of the voicemails. So, Quincy, let's get into that. Sanders, Cam Ward, if you're not picking number 1 overall, you're probably not getting Shedeur Sanders. He'll probably go number 1. The quarterback's going to go number 1. Who do you think's going number 1 overall?
I don't think it's going to be Shedeur. I don't think he's that knocked down of a prospect to where he goes number 1 overall. And it depends on who gets that number 1 overall pick, right? If the Las Vegas Raiders, who they've made their swan songs to, right, like the Sanders family has openly recruited like the ideal of going to the Raiders, then yeah, they might draft Shedeur number 1 overall. But I don't think it's a lock that a quarterback's going to go number 1 overall. 5 quarterbacks went in last year's first round, so the demand for quarterback is simply not going to be what it was going to be last year because you got 5 teams of the quarterback eligible teams already off the market, right? Once you draft the quarterback that year after, you're off the market for. So that takes off 5 QB needy teams that might have looked at a quarterback this year that definitely aren't going to be looking at a quarterback this year. So there's not going to be the same need for quarterback that there was in last year's draft. So the jumping of price for a quarterback is not going to jump up to, I think, number 1 overall. I think a lot of these quarterbacks have different questions about them. These are guys who are good fits for maybe at the tail end of the top 10 or in the bottom part of the first round, but I don't think you're gonna see teams rush to draft Shedeur number 1 overall. I think that there's gonna be more hype around like Kelvin Banks, or like this is a year where like a left tackle or an edge rusher you might not have heard about a ton gets number 1, number 2 overall, because again, the teams that might be drafting these quarterbacks this year, they also have quarterbacks on the roster they're already committed to, right? So I don't know if a quarterback goes number 1 overall this year.
It'll be interesting to see. Just the Panthers, you figure, will probably draft one. How'd you like to be in the Jaguars' position? They just paid $57 million to Trevor Lawrence, and they're going to have a new head coach probably too.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of teams that stink right now, they don't need quarterback, right? Like even the Panthers. I think they're going to really try to stick this thing out with Bryce Young. As much as I don't think it's an advice decision, I think they're going to try to stick this thing out with Bryce Young because that's somebody they thought was like a generational quarterback prospect at the time they selected him. And there's nobody in this class that makes you feel like if you felt that way about Bryce Young. Now, I'm going to be clear, I never felt that way about Bryce Young, but apparently the powers that be at Carolina did. I don't see anybody moving you off of that. So, like, yeah, Jacksonville might have like the #1 overall pick this year, but they're not going to move off of Trevor Lawrence to get Shedeur Sanders. Like, I think the need for quarterbacks going to really dictate how many teams jump into that conversation. And really, when we're talking about quarterbacks going #1 overall, they're either a unique prospect or the quality, the need for quarterback is so high that teams just feel pressure to take them super early.
Yeah, somebody's going to force it. Somebody is going to talk themselves into either Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. I'm with you. I don't think either one of them should go #1 overall. I think somebody's going to talk themselves into it. Of those two, who do you like do you like either for the Browns, or who should be the Browns' next quarterback?
I like Shedeur. Like, there's something about, like, I think the level of competition scares me off of him, right? He's only played this well in the Big 12. The Big 12 is certainly not the power conference he used to be, and it's not what the Pac-12 was. And last year, he struggled mightily in the Pac-12 when he came against the better competition in that league. So that kind of scares me. The lack of athleticism with his play style kind of scares me off of him a little bit, but I do think that there's a chance there that he could be a franchise quarterback. The other guy in this class that I think there's a chance, if you're patient with, can be a franchise quarterback is Jalen Milroe. And it's really about the intangibles with him. I know he's like a great athlete, and that's amazing and all of that, but this is somebody that you're going to be betting on to develop. And the thing about Jalen Milroe is every year I've seen him in college, he's gotten better every single year. This is somebody who's played in 3 separate offenses at Alabama, had 3 offensive coordinators his 3 starting years at Alabama, and still has found a way to progress and get better every year. I think you drop that dude in a stable environment. He's shown that he is a top-tier student. I think he's like the highest on Alabama in GPA, and he graduated super early. So, like, I trust that dude to learn, and then you look at his athletic profile, how fast he is, how great of an athlete he is. I think, hey, if there's somebody you're going to bet on to develop, similar to like a Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts, this guy gives you all the intangibles of somebody that's like, hey, that guy's probably going to do the work and have the work ethic and the mental fortitude to be a franchise quarterback with the tools that he naturally brings to the table. I mean, I just saw this dude outrun LSU's entire defense after doing that to Georgia. So I think he's the best athlete in this draft class. He has a ways to go as a passer, but I don't think he has as far to go as some people think.
The other thing that, assuming there aren't significant coaching changes, a guy that will know a little bit about him is Tommy Rees. Tommy Rees was one of those offensive coordinators for him. What do you think the Browns do at quarterback next year? Do you just bring everybody in, sign as many guys to compete, and see if anybody can develop? I don't think.
I think they're going to first go for a big fish.
Yeah, I don't think you can force your first-round pick to a quarterback, though. I really don't. That scares me.
Well, I don't think you should force it, right? Like, if you honestly feel like Jalen Milroe has a good chance to be a franchise quarterback, then you draft Jalen Milroe, or you draft not Jalen Hurts. You draft Shedeur Sanders or even Cam Ward. Like, if you legitimately feel like they could be Kirk Cousins, they could be this and that. Like, if you feel like that this guy can be a franchise quarterback, you draft him in the first round. But if you don't feel that, then you stay away from drafting a quarterback in the first round, right? That's my barometer. If you think that this guy's going to be a franchise quarterback and like legitimately believe that, take him in the first round. If you want him to be a franchise quarterback, then no, you should stay away from it, right? Like, you got to know the difference from truly believing and wanting to believe that with these two. And I think there's good reason to actually believe that Shedeur Sanders could be a franchise quarterback. I think there's good reason to actually believe that Jalen Milroe could be a franchise quarterback, right? And we're seeing the success that Jaden Daniels is having. I don't see Jalen Milroe as that different from Jaden Daniels, right? So I think that if you really like these quarterbacks, you take them in the first round. I think there's also another thing that they could do, even if they go for a quarterback in the first round, they could try to see if there's a quarterback that they can pick off to be the guy for like a couple of years, right? Like a short-term, high-quality bridge. I think Kirk Cousins is the guy that everybody thinks of. I mean, that's something that the Browns could do if they want to be creative enough and move around the salary cap as much as possible to make that happen. And they would be immediately competitive with Kirk Cousins for the next couple of years while also developing a quarterback behind him. Then there's like the bridge. Let's just do Jameis or Jacoby Brissett for a year or two, or like 10 games or something if you draft a rookie. So it's really going to be determined on what the options are that are available to them. But I expect the Browns to be looking at the trade market for a quarterback next year.
Quincy Carrier and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, we'll turn our attention back a little bit more towards the Saints game coming up. Sports for CLE. I'll be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier, Untitled, Unfiltered Browns coverage. Browns getting ready to face the Saints down in New Orleans. Jim Schwartz, defensive coordinator, talked about Ogbo Okoronkwo, Isaiah McGuire, and the other linemen that will get more reps after the trade of Zadarius Smith.
He can play to run for us, and he's done a good job. He plays a little different than Isaiah. But he certainly has effectiveness. He does it with a little bit more quickness and things like that, and some movement skills, where Isaiah gives us a little bit more size and length in there. But, I feel very confident that the guys we have can step up and fill Z's shoes and produce well for us, not just against the run, but also.
At end, I guess who you see also kind of stepping up, like the Sam Kamara guy. Obviously, he's practice squad, but is he a guy that maybe you'll play him a little bit more at end as opposed to the D tackle?
Yeah, we got a couple guys that can do that. Mike Hall played a little bit of end for us too, and he's got enough athletic ability and some speed and some power. So I think both of those guys can be some change-up players for us, and it'll affect our rotation a little bit. But Miles generally plays the bulk of our snaps, and then we can spell him when we need to, and get a good rotation at the other side.
Yeah, Quincy, it's kind of interesting. You think about it. McGuire's played pretty well before he got hurt. Alex Wright played really well. Intrigued with Mike Hall. They've kind of got young guys that are developing on the defensive line.
Yeah, it only took like 8 years to finally do, right?
They got him in bunches, though.
Yeah, the last 2 years, they've really been. I mean, you can add Ogbo Okoronkwo to this list because I think he's only like 26, 27 years old. So he's going to be here for a little while as well. But yeah, Ogbo, Isaiah McGuire, you can add Alex Wright, Mike Hall for sure is on top of that one too. That's 4 guys plus Myles Garrett that you feel really good about. And now, if the Browns want to get into more of I don't want to say a win now mode, but a competitive mode for next year, now you don't have to shop around for a bunch of defensive tackles on 1-year deals. You feel pretty good about Mike Hall holding it down. You feel pretty good about the edges holding it down, especially when Alex Wright comes back with Ogbo Okoronkwo. It's 3 guys that you feel good about outside of Miles, and you're probably only going to carry 4 edges. So that will save you not only a tremendous amount of money, but it will also allow you to spend that money at different places and probably move that money to the offense to kind of make up for part of the budget that's going to be invested in the quarterback who's probably not going to be active much next year.
All right, so this from Dog Pound Daily. 3 bold predictions for the Browns Saints Week 11. Myles Garrett will record multiple sacks again is number 1. Number 2, Jameis Winston bounces back in Week 11. Number 3, Browns win and everything becomes more complicated. Quincy, the Saints have already fired their head coach. They've lost, I think it's their 3 top wide receivers. Olave's out, he's on IR. Shaheed was on IR before that. One of their young rookies, Bub Means, is on IR. They're taking guys off the practice squad and saying whoever practices best this week is going to be active last week. And they ended up winning.
Yeah, I mean, they were playing Atlanta, right? They were playing a big rival in New Orleans. We know how those rivalry games can go different. The Browns just beat the Baltimore Ravens, right? It didn't mean nothing when they played against the Chargers. So, yeah, I wouldn't take them lightly, obviously, but I do think that this is a team that you can bounce back on. To kind of respond to the third point, I don't think the Browns winning makes anything complicated. The Browns shouldn't be that worried about their draft position. This is not a draft where you're like, oh, we got to get in the top 5 here because look at these 5 generational prospects. The guy that you could get at the top 5 at left tackle is not going to be much different than the guy you can get at 15 at left tackle. So if I'm the Browns, I want to build a culture of winning. And I want to win as much as possible. And I would like to remind folks, you've never seen a dynasty be built because a team decided to lose intentionally. Tanking's never built a dynasty. Look at all the good teams in the NFL right now. They did not intentionally lose to get the players that they got to get there. Like the teams that have done that, it's Miami and Cleveland. Look where we're at, right? Like it's not the great strategy that it feels like it is when your team is losing. I think it's just cope that makes us feel that way. The good teams try to win no matter what because you want to build to a standard to the team to aspire to no matter where you are in the season. I think that's more important than trying to decide whether you're going to be the 8th pick or the 10th pick.
Yeah, and you know what? The evaluation process doesn't start until after, so where you end up, I'm with you. Let me ask you this.
You can change where you end up in the draft, right? I think you can trade up in the draft if you don't like your position. You could do something about that. But if you get a stank of loser on you, that can't be changed. You can't trade loser away, right? So that's what you have to watch out for.
All right, what are you paying attention to with the Browns? What do you need to see the last, 8 games of the season? What do you want to see?
I need them to make a good argument, a great argument that the problems for this team offensively had to do with Deshaun Watson at quarterback, right? Like you want that argument to be made offensively for this team because the reason you do is that justifies keeping Kevin Stefanski. That justifies keeping Andrew Berry. Because if you look at this offense and you say, okay, the problem was Deshaun Watson fell off a cliff. We didn't expect it. Boom. That's the issue with the team. You can go into the offseason, build around that, and create a competitive team. If this team had better quarterback play, Dave, they'd be 5-4 at the very least right now. Like that's not a joke.
Yeah.
This is where they're at. They'd be 5-4. Like all this complaining, all this doom and gloom we're doing. They would be 5-4 if they just had mediocre quarterback play. I'm not saying like Josh Allen is the quarterback of this team. We'd be 5-4. Like if we just had mediocre quarterback play, we'd be 5-4 right now. So that to me, you have to make that argument going forward that you weren't that bad of a team that the beginning of the season suggested you were. You were just that bad because you were getting historically bad quarterback play from a player you absolutely did not expect to be historically bad. Now, how you handle that part of it, that's Andrew Berry's job going forward. That's his job to make sure that he avoids the brunt of the negative outcomes that can happen because of that. But if we're looking at Kevin and the Browns product on the field, you got to make the case that, hey, you weren't the team you were the first 7 weeks of the season, and there's a pretty good argument to why you weren't that team, and it starts at the quarterback position.
Quincy Carrier is always great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Quincy.
All right. Thank you, Dave. Y'all have a great day.
You too. Quincy Carey, make sure you check him out. Really good Browns stuff, untitled, unfiltered Browns coverage. Make sure you check it out. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Sam Monson from the 33rd team, straight ahead. Sports4CLE. You'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
I just picked up all the Ohio Lottery holiday scratch-offs.
They're multiplying.
Yeah, multiplying. With the chance to multiply my prize by 200 times with holiday bonus millions.
No, they're multiplying.
Oh, you're in a daze.
A holidays.
Snap out of it. Because even if we don't win instantly, all the holiday games offer a second chance to win up to 1,000 times the price of the ticket.
Wait, did you say up to 1,000 times?
Sure did.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation. I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams, I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE, ESPN Cleveland's Tony Rizzo. His thoughts on what's gone wrong with the Browns this year.
I think everybody is sympathetic and feels bad for Kevin because he's got to put up with a lot of crap. What he's put on the field this year is an F. An F. Getting ready for training, coming out of training camp. F. F. He's got to own it. And I know you all feel bad for him. Because he just got to put up with so much. He's got to, we don't really know what the hell's going on there. All I'm saying is, I like Kev. I think he's a good coach. He's not without blame here. I mean, you make it sound like he had nothing to do with this. It's his friggin' team that's 2-7. Andrew's not coaching the team.
Let's welcome in Sam Monson from the 33rd team, co-host of Check the Mic podcast. And Sam, you've got the mustache, so we'll start there. Raising money for Movember, so tell us about it.
Yes, thank you for allowing me to explain that this is not just how I generally look. This is specifically to raise money for a good cause, men's health. Movember, yeah, we're growing ridiculous facial hair over at the Check for Mike podcast, but it's all in the name of a good cause.
All right, so you look at the Browns, it's been a disaster. I mean, I could say other, but I'd be lying. There was expectations they would be contending for an AFC championship. Instead, they're contending for the first pick in the draft. My thing is, everybody, it's the personnel, it's the players, it's the coaching. It's been so bad, I don't think you can point to one thing.
Yeah. No, I agree. And that's always a difficult situation because everybody wants to point the finger of blame somewhere, right? We want to allocate it and say, this was the problem. There it is. Once we fix that, everything's good. But inevitably in these situations, there's always more than one problem. And the biggest problem may have been Deshaun Watson and the fact that he never pulled himself out of the disastrous level of play he's been at since he arrived in Cleveland, really. And then obviously the Achilles injury gave them a chance to go in a different direction and insert a different quarterback in there. And for a brief period, Jameis Winston did spark the team, did change things, did give them a higher ceiling and all those kinds of things. But, Jameis Winston is a quarterback at a certain level, and he's not going to fix a bad offensive line. You can't just immediately turn the offense back on to where it has been previously. So there are still underlying problems that are there, even with Jameis Winston. And of course, Jameis Winston is not a cure-all quarterback. I mean, he's a guy who got essentially benched or thrown out of a starting job after throwing for 5,000 yards and 30 touchdowns in a single season. The negatives of Jameis Winston are considerable. It's just that he's going to increase the ceiling and the variance within the offense in a way that Deshaun Watson wasn't before he got hurt.
So, normally when a team underperforms this much, there are changes. Both general manager and head coach got extensions. They both report to the owner. What do you think they need to do to maintain same general manager, same head coach? Do they need to turn things around in the second half?
It's a really difficult evaluation process now, I think, that needs to go on, because ultimately they have put themselves in a terrible position because of the Deshaun Watson deal. Now, only they know how much of that was ownership driven, how much of it was Andrew Berry, the GM, who was really driving that train and kind of getting that decision over the line. But if Andrew Berry was a big part of pushing that, he is effectively responsible for this millstone that hangs around their neck now. And that even if all of the other decisions he's made have been great, this is the one decision that might undermine all of it. Same thing with Stefanski. We're now saying, okay, it's definitely an indictment that he has not been able to even find the best side of all this, right? To sort of put lipstick on the pig, as it were, in terms of a franchise that's struggling, an offense that's underwater, injuries, all kinds of personnel problems. And he hasn't been able to improve that. If anything, the changes that he's made, whether it's been shifting in play calling, adjusting the offense, at minimum, it's not made any impact, and maybe it's made it worse. So I think they've got a very difficult evaluation to make, saying, we know that Stefanski is a good coach. We've seen it in the past when the situation was better. Andrew Berry's made a lot of very good decisions, and this overall is an extremely talented roster, which is why, as you said, before the season, we were thinking AFC title contender, not, number one overall pick contender. So he's done a lot of good things, but the type of mistake that they've made with the Deshaun Watson move is generally the type that gets people fired. So I think they have a difficult offseason of weighing up those pros and cons and deciding whether they need to fire people essentially as a punishment for the failure, or if actually they can say, we have the right people to put this right. We're just in a really tough spot now.
So this is also kind of interesting, and it'll tell you kind of what we were talking about relative to the Browns offense. This is from the 33rd team. So it's the lowest offensive success rate this season. Success rate equals when a play gains 40% of yards to go on first down, 60% of yards to go on second down, and 100% of yards to go on third or fourth down. Browns are the worst, 36.5%. Colts with Joe Flacco are second worst, 36.7%. Texans also 36.7%. You see the Raiders. Colts with Anthony Richardson are fifth, which is, it'll tell you things are really rough in Indianapolis, 37.8%, and the Panthers fifth. But again, when we talk about how bad this offense has been, those are numbers that, they're pretty damning with the offense.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody out there follows Austin Gale on Twitter or X, I mean, for every week of the Deshaun Watson saga, Austin was posting these sort of series of all-time futility stats, EPA per play. I mean, the Browns were genuinely operating not just the worst offense in the NFL this season, but one of the worst offenses in this millennium, with any quarterback at the helm. It was historically terrible. So it may have ticked upwards in the right direction with Jameis Winston a quarterback, but it has been for a full season effectively genuinely atrocious. The Colts make some sense as well with Anthony Richardson, simply because of the inaccuracy and the incredibly low percentage of passes he's been completing. Flacco, I think, is a little bit of a victim of the defenses and the opponents that he's faced. He's come in against two very good defenses, and I think that definitely hurts his overall production. And so his is kind of, I think, a bit of a false positive there on a small sample size. But yeah, it's definitely been pretty bad for both those teams.
All right, take a look at this chart. This is, again, it's the percentage to sack, pressure to sack percentage and time to pressure percentage. And you see the two Browns quarterbacks are getting pressured quickly and getting sacked quickly at a high percentage. So the average time to pressure is across the screen. That's the x-axis. Up and down would be the sacks. See, there are quarterbacks that are getting pressured quicker who are not getting sacked as much. So it's a combination of offensive line and quarterback processing that's what that tells you. Is that the way you read that as well?
Yeah, it's a really interesting chart because generally the time to pressure is going to be something of an offensive line driven stat. Certainly the quicker the time to pressure is. But the pressure to sack rate is a quarterback driven data point. So generally quarterbacks can control whether or not they get sacked when the pressure arrives. Now, there are going to be some times where that's not true. The first thing they know about a sack arriving is when they get, nailed from an angle that they haven't even seen the guy. But generally speaking, the quarterback is in control over whether that pressure is just a hurry or if it turns into a hit or a sack. They can get rid of the football. But they're not in control of when the pressure arrives if it's coming quickly. Now, they can control it the longer they linger with the ball. Obviously, the more pressure you're going to get. But this is interesting because I think you see some teams where the offensive line isn't great. They're allowing pressure, but the quarterback is able to get rid of the ball and mitigate that pressure and not have it turn into catastrophic plays. And then you have the reverse is true. Now, what you're seeing with those two Browns quarterbacks is they're on the wrong side of both those data points. The offensive line has absolutely been struggling and it's been hemorrhaging quick pressure, but also both quarterbacks have been bad at turning that into sacks. They've been amplifying really the negative impact of the pressures that are coming, and they've been allowing a large proportion of those pressures to become sacks. So it's the worst of both worlds.
Yeah, and the question becomes, is the offense giving you the answers quick enough? Or is it, which would lead to, is the scheme creating some of those sacks as well, which that's even more concerning.
Yeah, and none of these things operates in a vacuum, right? So the quarterback controls part of that pressure as well. You need answers both in terms of scheme, but also in terms of the protections that you're calling and making sure you have the right protections called for the looks that you're seeing before the snap. And then even with pressure to sack rates, those can be influenced by receivers, by all these other things as well. So it's the awkward thing about football is that none of these data points are clean and not influenced. There's always confounding factors in every one of these data points you're looking at.
Sam Monson from the 33rd Team, co-host of the Check the Mic podcast, and I can step aside, take a quick time out. We'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
I just picked up all the Ohio Lottery holiday scratch-offs.
They're multiplying.
Yeah, multiplying. With the chance to multiply my prize by 200 times with holiday bonus millions.
No, they're multiplying.
Oh, you're in a daze.
A holidays.
Snap out of it. Because even if we don't win instantly, all the holiday games offer a second chance to win up to 1,000 times the price of the ticket.
Wait, did you say up to 1,000 times?
Sure did.
We continue talking Browns with Sam Monson from the 33rd Team, co-host of the Check the Mic podcast. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, guys. I was listening to your show yesterday, and the conversation still seems to be around getting rid of our two-time Coach of the Year and Mr. Barry. And I heard somebody sitting there say, well, give them another year. Giving them another year means you're going to lose Drabel. And if you listen to Tony Grossi and Mr. Drennan, they both agree that Drabel should be the guy. Don't let him get away. You continue to tell me that he used 5 quarterbacks to win last year. He won because of a defense. And his leather helmet offense is about as innovative as the facial features you make on the air. It's not his offense. And to tell me that he came in and put in a new offense, what new offense? Something he had buried in the closet that's even older than what he ran before? This is very disheartening. Take care.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Sam, that's one of our Rochester callers who have been calling to fire Kevin Stefanski for quite a while. I like Mike Vrabel as a head coach. If that's what they decide to do, okay. When you change head coaches, you want to change something. Like Vrabel would be a more emotional guy. I get that. He's a local guy. He's from Akron area here. So I could see the appeal. I don't know. The question is, does he want to be the head coach here?
Yeah, does he want it? Vrabel would also bring in a lot of changes. Not everything needs to be changed. I understand things are very bad right now and there's a lot of problems, but not everything in the organization is bad and needs to be uprooted. I mean, Vrabel was fired in large part because he was difficult to get along with, right? And there was some disagreements with Vrabel and with the personnel side of things. And, you can look back with hindsight and say maybe Vrabel was right about a lot of that stuff. But the bigger issue is that they couldn't find a way to work harmoniously together, and it seemed to cause problems. So if Vrabel comes in, I assume he would change defensive schemes. So that's Jim Schwartz gone. You have to wonder, would he be able to work well with Andrew Berry and everything that they're doing on the personnel side? So I don't think it's a slam dunk that Vrabel would be the ideal candidate. I think he was a very good coach and consistently got more out of the talent that he had in Tennessee than maybe they deserve to get. So I think generally he's a solid candidate, but I don't know that it's, a guarantee that he'd be an upgrade over Stefanski, given what Stefanski has done there in the past.
Yeah, and again, I get it. When you're 2-7, it's not acceptable. So I think Mike Vrabel is a really good head coach. I don't know that I would move off Kevin Stefanski with him, and that's what the caller was referring to. All right, highest graded defenders going into Week 11 from PFF. Number 1 is T.J. Watt. Number 2, Khalil Mack. Fred Warner is 3, and Myles Garrett ranked number 4 ahead of Brian Branch. So lost in what has been a really disappointing season is, again, another really good year by Myles Garrett, who was the Defensive Player of the Year last season.
Yeah, Myles Garrett has been spectacular again. I mean, people who watch the tape of Myles Garrett will tell you this guy is one of the best defensive players in all of football. And it's one thing to do that in a given season and put together a Defensive Player of the Year kind of year. It's another thing to be able to do it year after year after year. And he's now putting together a serious run of 3 or 4 seasons where he's been as good as anybody. And this season, I think TJ Watt is maybe marginally better than Garrett, but last season the reverse was true. And we are talking about 2 superstar, game-changing, elite pass rushers who will define and change the outcome of football games. Those 2 guys are absolutely spectacular.
So this one is from The Athletic. It's best draft options for teams vying for the number 1 overall pick. And for the Browns, they say the best option is to trade down. Projected record 5-12. Browns have too many needs in too many areas. Plus, they are in an absolutely hellacious situation with Deshaun Watson. Rather than immediately putting themselves back behind the 8 ball, the Browns should find a way to cash hypothetical number 1 pick for more capital. I understand the thought. If there is a quarterback they think can be a franchise quarterback, they better not trade down.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it depends what shape the roster is in at that point, whether they're able to patch together some of the losses and some of the holes that have emerged through this season. Yeah, generally, it's going to be a difficult draft class. Opinions on this draft class of quarterback are all over the map. It's not quite where it was in the a couple of years ago, the Kenny Pickett draft, where he was the only quarterback that went in the first round. And even that felt like a significant reach. And maybe if Kenny Pickett hadn't been drafted in the first, I don't know when the first quarterback would have been taken in that draft. If they would have slipped all the way into the third where the rest of the QBs went. It's not quite that. Nobody's saying that there's going to be no first round quarterback, but I don't know if any of them are going to be elite top end, top 5 draft picks. So that's where it starts to get really tricky to gauge. You might easily have a quarterback available, but if you're the only one that thinks he's the guy, maybe you are better off trading back and hedging and playing, the percentages and trying to pick up extra draft capital and maybe taking the next guy on the list who would be available later on, but you get to pick up extra draft picks. It's going to be a very difficult and interesting draft to see how teams navigate it because of the uncertainty at the quarterback position.
Is the Browns roster when you look at it, what do you see from the Browns roster? Maybe that's a better. It doesn't seem like they should be a 2-7 team. It seems like their quarterback play kind of put them in a big hole.
Yeah, I think it's better than that. I think it is still a very good roster. They've had some holes emerge through injuries. A lot of teams in the NFL have. That offensive line, it's better than we've seen for a lot of this season because of injuries. And they've changed the roster a little bit. You trade away Amari Cooper, so there's areas potentially that need help that didn't necessarily before. But I think this is still a very good football team at its core. The foundations are still very good, with the exception of now quarterback is this massive question mark, whereas previously it at least had a theoretical answer to it. We just hadn't seen that play yet from Deshaun Watson. So I think this is still a team where if they do get good quarterback play from somewhere, whether that's a run of good play from Jameis Winston, whether they just find somebody else to come in, if they get that, it's very quickly a team that immediately goes back to being, a 500 or better football team.
Sam Monson, 33rd team, as always. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Sam.
Anytime. Take it easy.
Sam Monson from the 33rd team. Make sure you check him out. He's co-host of the Check the Mic podcast. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.